So, good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. And in Bisaya, maayong hapon. Welcome to this Poultry Seminar online, sponsored by the Xavier University of Ateneo in collaboration with the Philippine College of Poultry Practitioners, to which I'm a member. I'd like to thank the organizers for allowing me to speak before you on a topic about poultry. I feel deeply honored and privileged to be able to speak something about the Philippine poultry industry, especially during these hard times of COVID-19. But before I proceed, I'd like to say that the views and opinion that I'm going to say throughout the discussion are based on the long years of practice as a veterinary consultant. So this is basically a perspective from a veterinarian. And I'm sure that some of my views and opinions is shared by many poultry farmers as well. Now, this is a very huge topic, and I hope that I can cover some of the key points pertinent to the topic given the prescribed time that I have been given. Now, the views and opinion that I'm going to say is not necessarily undermine the policies and actions of the government as well as the private sector, but more also to create a balance between the government and the private producers. So with that, let's proceed. Tayo mag-move. Saan ang control ng... Hindi siya mag-move. Cell, hindi siya mag-move, mag-forward. Wow. Sige, ayun, kita ko na. Okay, sorry. So, for those who are familiar with me, some of the slides that I'm going to use have been used in the previous presentation I made, but I beefed them up with the slides that pertain to the impact of COVID-19 so that it will be more relevant during these critical times. Now, I also included innovations and opportunities with hope in mind that we will be able to recover in due time. We will be trying to see what will happen for the rest of 2021 and probably beyond. And hopefully we have time for some question and answer. Now, the mission of when I was many years ago, we used to eat chicken only during Christmas and during special occasions like birthdays. But nowadays, given the ample supply, given the supply of chicken available in the market and the access of the product to the customer, we can literally eat chicken every day. Now, the objective of the poultry raiser is to raise this day-old chick, to produce the broiler chicken, and to raise the day-old pullets into laying the eggs. So the poultry industry needs to provide quality food for Filipinos, especially in these critical times. But I would like to add that in the near future or in the future, we should be providing quality food, which is generally safe and ample supply so that there will be a food sufficiency in the future. Now, taking a look at the histogram of the livestock industry, we can see that there is a domination of the hog industry over all the livestock. This is closely followed by the poultry industry. This is based on the 2019 report of PSA. Now, the figure for hog is generally bigger in the previous 3 years, but you know for a fact that there has been problem with African swine fever, and this figure has been reduced considerably. Some experts from the swine industry say that 40% of their population has been affected. So this figure of poultry will eventually rise, and some experts are saying that eventually poultry population or tonnage will overtake that of the hog industry. Now, this is a representation of the inventory of the broilers and layers. By the way, I will not be discussing about the native and improved chicken because that will be another topic. You can see that the volume of inventory for broilers has been erratic through the last 6 years, going up and going down, especially in 2017 because of the outbreak of bird flu in July of 2017, affecting also the inventory in 2018. And definitely for 2020, the volume of inventory for broilers will be lower than that of 2019. However, for layers, we can see that there's a continuous increase in volume as far as stock inventory is concerned, probably because of the better profitability and increased demand for eggs, for table eggs. Now, if you are talking of broilers, it is approximately based on current figures of 2019 to be around 175 billion. And the major players are the broiler integrators, which I'm sure you are aware of. And the other group, of which we have here in the audience, will be the UBRA, or the United Broiler Raisers Association. It's a big umbrella group consisting of the big to medium-sized poultry raisers, fully integrated also. So regardless of who is bigger, they are all united in producing broiler chicken for the Philippines. Now, based on the figure by UBRA as provided by Deltaman, we can see that the volume of production in the Philippines has been increasing for the last 6 years despite the low average inventory as stated by PSA. Now, we can see that this is probably because of the increased demand for broiler meat as well as the increase in population. Now, in the figure for 2020, as you can see at 1.497, if you will allow me to read, it's not actually accurate because this is just based on the GPPS importation and did not consider the volume reduction, which was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and likewise due to the effects of the fourth quarter typhoons, which has really hit the country badly in the last quarter of last year. So consequently, we are assuming that the volume for 2021 will be lower at 1.3 billion. Hence, we can see that the broiler inventory for 2020 up to the middle of 2021 will be lower than 2019, basically because of the lower prices in 2020. I will be showing you later a slide showing you the monthly average pricing of broilers. And in general, the broiler raisers has lost a lot of money in 2020 because of low prices. And this has resulted to a major decision by the breeders to cull their parent stock at a very early age before they can fully amortize the value. So some have resorted to selling of hatching eggs as table eggs, as we can see the presence of brown eggs in the market on probably around April or May or June of last year, so that it will no longer be hatched into day-old chicken and the losses will be less. And some resorted to early pull-out during incubations para magiging balot siya so that hindi na siya magiging DOC. And of course, I mentioned earlier the effect of the fourth quarter typhoons. All of these things has led to a diminished supply of day-old chicks for broilers. Hence, we were able to see an increase in prices for broilers, for live broilers, late in 2020, starting October, and up to now. And I foresee that the prices will remain high up to the middle of the first semester, or probably even up to the end of the first semester. That is, if the government or if the producers will not be able to compensate by producing more chicks, although they don't have the necessary PS available, or if they can be able to import hatching eggs from other countries if available. However, if the prices of live broilers will continue to go up and the retail prices of dressed chicken will go up also, then the food security issues of the government may force them to allow more importation of chicken meat in order to hopefully bring down the prices of chicken. So much so for, meantime, for the broiler industry, we can now go to the layer industry. The layer industry is a little bit smaller at 63 billion industry, latest figures by PSA. Then at any given time, we had an average of 40 million active layers. And we have several strains, so many strains available in the Philippines, but the more dominant strains are Rollan and DeKalb. Now, some people say we Filipinos prefer white eggs, but actually it is what is available. 2 years or several years ago, when there is a shortage of white eggers, if you can call that, the poultry breeders were forced to import brown eggs, brown parent stock. So after 6 months or a year, we have although this constitutes something like less than 2% of the market, of the volume available at the market. So we can see some in the market, and I'd like to make a point that if you see brown eggs in the market, it does not necessarily mean that it is organic or free-range. It is how you raise the chicken for it to become an organic egg or an organic or a range chicken laid egg. So that is important. One advantage of the Philippine egg industry is there is minimal egg imports, basically because of the fast deterioration of the product if you are importing the liquid egg. Although in the Philippines, there are some egg farms that are supplying liquid egg to institutional accounts. And if you eat in fast food stores, breakfast, chances are you will be eating egg powder, but it is very expensive to produce egg powder locally, considering that you have to remove something like 70 to 75% of the water for it to become an egg powder. So those countries who are exporting egg powder are using the what do you call this? The substandard eggs, the downgrade eggs for their use, because their selling price of eggs is higher, and whatever downgrades they have, they can use that for egg powder at no cost at all. Now, whether the poultry raisers, the farmers from the layer sector will agree with me, they are making profit for the last 5 or 6 years. That is why we can see there is a continuous expansion of all players. Dinadaan nila sa dami. But what is interesting is there are new players coming in from the hog sector, because hog farms that are displaced without stock, they resorted into converting their facilities into their farms. Some eventually put up their own separate farms. And what is interesting about also this, they are putting up, majority of them are using climate controlled system houses. And big farms, I have known big farms with projected cage capacity of 400,000 are being constructed little by little, or in a couple of 1 or 2 years. So with the shortage of available DOP and PS and the increased demand, naturally there will be a shortage of the old pullets and RTL in the market. That is why the prices for DOP has increased tremendously throughout the years. In fact, I know in 6 years ago, the price of DOP is around 28 to 30, but now it's around 60. And the price of RTL that before was around 220 to 30. Right now it's 330, depending on where you buy your RTL. So one point I'd like to point out is be careful when you buy DOP and RTL from suppliers that you don't know, because there are news that there are suppliers of DOP that will include as many as cockerels as possible, which will not be of use to you. And there are suppliers of RTL that will give you RTL at 16 weeks at around 600 or 700 grams, which is really bad, and you will not get anything out of it. Now, this slide will show you that really in 2019 and 2020, I presume there is a reduction of volume there's a reduction of population compared to that of 2019. That's why the average inventory is around 40 million at any given time. So that the reduction is not that small, but if you will notice that there is an increase from 2016 to 2017 by 16% and 10% consecutively. Ibig sabihin yan, dumadami ang manok natin, and then nagplato lang siya ng 2019 and 2020. And I will explain to you why later on. Now, this slide will show you that there is a continuous increase in the importation of PS for layers, and except when there is a reduction in 2013 and 2014 because of the typhoon that wreaked havoc in the central Visayas. But eventually, the industry was able to recover and improve their importation to 431 in 2016 and more than 500,000 in 2017. However, because of the effect of the bird flu outbreak, the first bird flu outbreak in 2017, July of 2017, wherein the prices of eggs went down as well as that of the broilers. There was a reduction in the PS importation in 2018, which resulted in good prices in 2019. Ganun lang talaga yan eh. So in 2019, we were able to import more than 530,000 PS, and supposed to be we should be importing less than 600,000 in 2020, but because of the COVID pandemic, we were only able to reach, the Philippines was only able to import something like 512,000. However, although you don't see that in the screen, we were able to import more than 300,000 hatching eggs to supply the requirements of the market. So this is just a repetition of what I said earlier. So because of this, they were saying that the 322,000 additional hatching egg imported from July to December of 2020 has an impact based on the experts in layer breeding is an equivalent of 100,000 PS immediately for 2021. So in essence, you can say that there is a more available supply of PS in DOP in 2021 than in 2020. I'd like to return to my previous slide. I would like to say that nakalimutan ko sabihin ito na because of the disruption in air travel, majority of the volume for PS importation came in at the second semester because there was a relaxation in the travel. Likewise, when the PS arrived in the Philippines, there are no flights going to Visayas and Mindanao. That is why majority of the PS arrival in 2020 were placed in Luzon. Only around 21% were placed in Visayas and Mindanao. So the raisers in Mindanao and Visayas will have to get their DOP requirements from Luzon. Going back to my previous slide, so I would say that the prices of DOP will continue to remain high until the middle of 2021. Hopefully, when the incoming breeders came into lay and produced DOP, the supply of DOP will be stabilized by second semester of 2021. Hopefully, the prices will normalize. Subsequently, the prices of egg in general for 2021, I forecast will be slightly lower than that of 2020, but still the poultry raisers is still making some form of profit. Now, so much for the status. I'd like to mention that in every industry, in every undertaking, there will always be challenges. And challenges are supposed to be stimulating tasks or problems that sometimes nakaka-stress dun sa ating industriya, no? And I have listed down several challenges, and I will be discussing some of them briefly, and some of them will be discussed more detailed. No? Weather, you know that the climate change has really affected the Philippines, being one of the most affected country one of the most affected country as far as climate change is concerned, as exemplified by the number of typhoons we have experienced last year. No? And this weather, number one, has wreaked havoc on the facilities for poultry facilities. In Central Luzon, they were saying that if you have a conventionally built broiler houses and layer houses, which is roughly around 15 to 20 years old, no, for broilers, and you have a typhoon that has a gustiness of more than 200 kilometers per hour, the chances of the survival of that facility will be very low. No? So right now, they were saying that the tunnel ventilated houses has a capacity to withstand the up to 250 kilometers per hour gustiness. No? The weather also has an effect on the performance of the broilers. That's what we call the third quarter syndrome, which I will not be elaborating so much, because the weather has an impact on the raw materials. No? We know for a fact that because of the typhoons in the last quarter, yung mga corn natin sa region 2 was affected and harvest was bad. That's why we're experiencing a shortage of corn nowadays. Likewise, the weather in other countries producing soya, I heard that they were had experienced drought, so the harvest of soya is very low. Pero itong second-hand information, which is gossip, sabi nila, kaya daw shortage ng soya ngayon kasi tumaas ang presyo ng soya by 4 to 5 pesos is gawa daw nag-i-stock up daw ang China. Pero second-hand information yun in preparation for their renewal of their hog industry. So I'll be discussing the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So what are the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic? Ang dami, ano? And where if not, kung sabi nila kung wala daw COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippines is on the way to another economic growth in 2020, you know. But nandiyan na yan, and the government in cooperation with other banks abroad, they have to cushion the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic against and protect the people against the health and economic challenges, especially the most vulnerable people, which is the poor. No? The ADB in their September 2020 report made a forecast that before they were still saying that kakaroon pa ng economic growth, but they made a forecast in 2020 September that for 2020 we will be down by 7%. Economy will be, the GDP growth will be a negative at 7.3%. But the good news is it will not go down anymore. Hopefully in 2021 with the recovery of the economy, and it will post an increase of 6.5%. So not bad. Now, I was saying earlier that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a disruption of the travel as far as the delivery of goods and services, more so with the importation of the parent stock. You know? And it's not really the delay, it's also the quality of the chicks coming in, because the travel that normally takes some time, normally, you know, I am not particularly aware of the exact number of time. Pagka nagkaroon ng pandemic, nagkakaroon siya ng mga checks sa airports, maraming dinadaanan. So, sinasabi nila na pag dumating daw yung DOP rito, yung chicks daw is marami daw DOA o maraming mortality during the first 2 weeks of life. So, the figures that we mentioned earlier could have been less because of the difficulty in transporting the PS and the hatching egg as well. Overall, the effects of the COVID-19 will be, of course, you have unemployment and underemployment. No? You say underemployment, meron kang trabaho, pero ang trabaho mo 3 times a week lang. So with less employment or no employment at all, the government tried to subsidize and give assistance to the people, but then the assistance hindi natin nakikita masyado sa lahat. No? So people with less money have no or reduced buying capacity. So, sinong bibili ng manok, sinong bibili ng mga goods, all they have to do is rely on what is given to them by their barangays. No? Secondly, there's an impaired flow of goods and services. I remember that after the declaration of the ECQ in March 16 of 2020, nagkaroon ng stoppage. Yung mga manok na natin na nakasalang sa mga farm, especially the broilers, they encountered difficulty in harvesting these birds because of the lockdown, no? And so the birds got oversized. They have to sell that at a very low price just to dispose, you know. And even when that they have been able to transfer them to their dressing plant, yung mga dressing plant hindi rin siya nag-ooperate dahil meron silang tinatawag na lockdown, no? So there is a resulting very low price of farm grade of essential products, not only chicken, not only eggs, but also fish and vegetables. Alam naman natin yun, nakikita natin sa news, ano? And yet, the Filipino people has poor access to food. So pagka bumili ka at that time, mahal naman yung mga mabibili nating pagkain dahil hindi siya available sa market, ano? So that's a very bad situation at that time. Now, generally, the effect of the pandemic on the prices of chicken, I will be explaining them to you, but I would like to give you a rundown of what happened in the last 5 years, you know, because this has a bearing on what will happen in 2021. In 2017, we had an outbreak of bird flu in July of 2017. That's why the prices of chicken went down for the next 2 months. However, we were able to rebound Napatay na yung mga manok na nandun sa area, so nagkaroon na ng wala na yung scare, and however, because of the fear of the prolonged low prices, many of our breeders also did early culling. So there was a reduction of supply. So that's why the prices in October to December went up. And also there was, and then eventually it remained more or less stable for the whole year of 2018, except for the last few wherein there was an oversupply of chicken at this point in time. Now, here in 2019, it's a different thing, because in 2019, you can see that starting on May, nag-umpisa na yan, then on June, July, tumaas na siya. And what will be the reason? The reason is because meron na tayong announcement na meron ng ASF sa Pilipinas. No? So as there is, the Filipinos, initially they feared of eating pork, so they resorted to chicken as a source of protein. No? So eventually, tumaas ang presyo. And also because the government expect the increased consumption of chicken, they imported chicken during this time. That is why medyo bumaba ang manok ang first 2 months of 2020. No? Now in 2020, you can see that when in March 16, when the lockdown was announced, bumaba talaga ang presyo ng manok, and ever since nagkakaroon na siya, it only increased in June, July, but bumaba na naman siya ng August to September. And then because of what we mentioned earlier, that there is a reduction in available parent stock, as well as the day-old chick availability in the market, tumaas ang presyo ng manok. At saka nag-loosen na rin yung ating lockdown dito, so medyo lumabas na yung tao, kumain na ng manok. And the price of chicken increased tremendously as up to the present. And I will show you the price later on of chicken. No? So, kaya ako sinasabi ito is, in my opinion, what happened in 2018 might be similar to what will be happening in 2021, although mas mataas magiging presyo, especially for the first 6 months of the year. And it's really up to the key players and the government to do if whether they will be importing more hatching egg, etc., just to bring down the prices. Consequently, if you have high prices or low prices of live birds, the DOC, walang gusto mag-alaga ng manok, so yung presyo ng DOC will go down. And this is a record-breaking price, an average price of 13 pesos in April of last year, even lower when we had an outbreak of bird flu in 2017. And because of this is below cost. Ang cost ng DOC is around 21, 22. So, yung nga sinabi natin na nag-cut down sila sa PS, nag-cut down sila sa hatching egg, etc., so that there is a reduction of available supply, which was reflected by the increase in prices. Marami na nag-alaga ng manok ng October, November, December. And the prices went down to as more than 40 pesos per head. Now, this is a price survey made by UPRA as of last week, and they were saying, and the price is maintained at around more than 110 pesos for Luzon. That's live regardless of size. And then for Mindanao, the price of dressed chicken is something like 139 to 142, which is a little bit lower than what we have in Luzon. But the DOC price, they were saying it's at 46, but I was got the information today that the price of DOC is now at 49. So parang nakakatabi nga nung nag-comment is parang nakakatakot na mag-alaga, because if your price of chicken of DOC is 46 to 49, your cost of production will be more than 100 pesos per kilo. Assuming that mapalaki mo yung alaga mong manok. As far as the egg industry is concerned, makikita natin dito na conspicuously, the average selling price of medium is higher than that of, makita nyo ba, 498 as against 553 is higher than that of 2019. So, kita kayo, nag-COVID, tumaas pa yung presyo. Why? I give you some reasons. Number one is the egg is very accessible to eat. It can be handled, it can be sold immediately. Hindi siya masyadong perishable at madali siyang bumili. Secondly, I was talking to several buyers from one of the client firms that I had, and they were saying, and I asked them, oh, kumusta na ho yung egg, benta nyo ng egg? And they were saying, as Filipinos will always eat eggs for breakfast. And what I realized is yung traditional way of selling eggs at the time, yung mga big distributors, wet markets, hindi masyadong umandar doon dahil COVID nga, walang gustong pumunta sa palengke. And because many of us Filipinos were forced to work at home, they have time to do something else to earn extra income. And I have talked to several people, including my wife also did that. We tried to get eggs from the farm and sell it to house. So you get some even went to online selling, advertising, we can deliver eggs at your house within this area, etc., etc. So there is a shift from marketing, from wholesaling to retailing, but the prices were good. So actually the demand did not diminish. And in fact, eggs, Filipinos love to eat eggs as a substitute for pork and chicken. So kaya mas mataas ang presyo ng itlog ng 2020 compared to 2019 and the last 6 years. I would like to point out also that yung 2019 and 2020, because of ASF and there is a reduction in the requirements for raw materials. I think there was a 60% reduction in demand. So the feed prices for 2019 and 2020 were relatively lower than that of 2018. So makikita natin yung mga price ng, I think it's around 100 to 200 pesos lower per bag yung mga price ng per sack ng mga layer feeds at saka broiler feeds compared with the previous years, because the demand for usage of these raw materials has been diminished considerably because of the absence of the hogs. Overall, the COVID-19 produced a negative effect on the economy as shown earlier. And hindi lang naman tayo nagkaganon, buong mundo nagkaganon. So, I have mentioned to you the reason bakit bumaba ang presyo, ang supply ng manok, leading to increased prices towards the end of 2020 and today, because there is an overall reduction in poultry production of broilers. And also, we see that there is an slight increase in prices in 2020 compared to 2019. I'm sorry. And broiler prices will continue to increase from December to present. It will be higher until I think probably end of the first semester. And also, there will be an increase in the cost of feeds by so much. And I'd like to point out again that most of our audience are from Bismin, that there is limited PS allocation for Bismin for 2020. So kakaunti ang DOP na available in that area. Now, one of the major challenges in the Philippines will be diseases. Kaya ito yung trabaho ng mga veterinaryo. And more importantly, the presence of the avian influenza or bird flu. In April of 2020, we had our second outbreak of bird flu in some areas in Laguna, but recently the Department of Agriculture declared that the Philippines is already bird flu free, so that's really good news for us. Now, recently, because of the increased awareness of the antimicrobial resistance brought about by perceived consumption by the consumption of poultry products, livestock, pork, beef, that has the perception to be loaded with antibiotics. The government has been very strict in the implementation of, there will be supposed to be no residue of antibiotics or antichemicals in your products, especially eggs. So I'd like to make some definition of terms for you to better understand kung ano ba talaga yung mga antimicrobial, etc., na yan. Definition natin is, when you say antibiotic free, when you see in the market that the product is antibiotic free, it does not necessarily mean na hindi siya gumamit ng antibiotic for broilers. Sinasabi lang niya na nag-follow siya ng proper withdrawal time, which is supposed to be for broilers around, usually it's 7, pero we're now doing it at 10. So pagka nag-withdrawal ka 10 days before harvest, supposed to be wala ng residue. But as we go down the line, we can see that there is a continuous reduction of the usage, especially the routine antibiotics, which are supposed to be done for growth promotion and prevention of diseases. Hindi na yan masyadong hindi na yan ina-allow ng gobyerno. What the government, based on the current directives, is you only use antibiotic if the animal is sick. And how do you know if the animal is sick? You need a veterinarian to do that for you. And so sick animals are supposed to be not for sale. Now, the basic target that this is very difficult to attain is no antibiotic ever, meaning there will be no use of antibiotics from the parent stock to the offspring. And I think there are companies now that are claiming to have attained that level of efficiency as far as antibiotic residue is concerned. But in other countries, for a company to be certified, you have to be certified that actually your products are antibiotic free. And there's such thing as the National Sanitation Foundation, which is based in Singapore, or I think in Bangkok, that needs to certify your products to be free from antibiotics or what. And that is similar to yung mga ISO natin na ginagawa natin sa Aquan. So it's not really proper to say that your chicks are already free of antibiotics without some neutral body certifying it for you. Anyway, one hot topic nowadays, in fact, the PCPP is in constant meeting with the Bureau of Animal Industry regarding the some additional guidelines on the Animal Welfare Act, which is supposed to protect the animal from these stress pictures, And I think on the farm accreditation issue, you have to have a vet that has attended the animal welfare seminar, or your farm managers has attended the animal welfare seminars for you to make sure that the animals are not distressed because of these things, So there's really a need for veterinarians to do that for you. And it has been a problem for many farms, yung environmental concern registration. We really have to comply to this. We have really to make sure that we are not contaminating the environment with our waste, But this is not easily done, But I'd like to point out that as far as local permits and permit to operate is concerned, yung mga LG requirements kumisan hindi sila pare-pareho. In some towns, ganito requirement. In some towns, ganito requirement. And it poses a problem of difficulty for some new investors to put up a poultry facility because of restrictions of the LGU. This is different from the zoning restrictions kasi alam naman natin na we have allocated lands also na doon lang sila pwede mag-poultry. So in reality, the bottom line is there will be limited lands available for livestock production. So this is just a summary of the requirements for farm accreditation. I might have missed some things, but these are the more important ones. I'd like to point out that based on the law, all drugs used in the poultry has to be done with the veterinary prescription. So ang alam ko, yung lahat ng farms ng 10,000 up or meron volume 1 is they have to have a veterinary farm veterinarian or veterinary consultant to the prescription for that. Using drugs without prescription is supposed to be a violation of this law. Okay. Now, this is a very ticklish topic, and I'd like to be what do you call this? I'd like to be very relevant, to be very honest about it. There seems to be that for us to really survive and to sustain our growth of poultry industry, there has to be a balance of local production versus imports, whether it be broiler, whether it be pork, whether it be palay, whether it be vegetable. So for broilers, this is the history of the importation from 2016 to 2020. And you can see that there is except for 2017 because of the bird flu, there is a gradual increase up to 2018, but there is a rapid increase from 2019 to to 2020. I mentioned earlier that this increase in importation can be due to the fact that the government anticipated an increase in the requirement of chicken because of the ASF problem. You know? And please take note that the percentage of mechanically deboned meat consists of 68 to 70% of the total importation in tonnage. You know, this mechanically deboned meat is being used by meat processors as filling material for their processed meat. You know, and I think I heard in the news that effective February, the tariff will be maintained at 5%. It will be extended up to 2022, December of 2022, to give time for they were saying that if you maintain that, there will be no increase in the price of the processed meat. You know, but the poultry raisers are not very agreeable on this matter. So whatever policies the government is doing, I think it's more on the issue of food security and to satisfy majority of the people. Whatever things that the private producers are doing is basically to protect the industry. So there has to be a balance of local production versus imports as far as chicken importation is concerned. And the most important thing is, in the near future, hindi ho ako sinostradamus, because of the increase in population and the clamor for food, yung dapat talaga ang isang country should be sufficient as far as food is concerned, because there will come a time that those exporting countries will no longer be able to export as much food as possible because they will in turn will need it. Para ring oil yan eh. Eventually, pag naubos yung oil, wala na silang i-export para sa atin. So this early, the government and the private sector, the poultry producers should focus on long-term self-sufficiency. And that is eventually point down to balancing the local production versus import. I hope I did that right. I got that right. So for us to recover, we have to have some innovations, innovations are defined to be new ideas, methods, or devices. And what are these innovations? Although hindi naman talaga siya ganun kabago. Well, we have the conversion of the open-sided houses to conventional houses. We have from manual sorting to automated egg machines in the market. So these are pictures of the conventional poultry houses. These poultry houses are at least 20 years of age. You know? And I mentioned earlier that if a typhoon with 200 kilometers per hour gustiness, baka bumagsak to. No? So in this place, lumalabas na po natin itong mga tunnel ventilated houses. Meron na po tayo ngayon na cage type na tunnel ventilated houses for broilers, which can house more birds per square meter. No? The same is true for layer houses. Although this is medyo matibay itong layer houses to at saka medyo semi-automatic, compared to a climate control system, which can house around 30,000 to 46,000 heads per building. And now meron na po tayong nakikita sa mga farms natin na double decker, which can house 90,000 to 100,000 per building of layers. And if you have that volume, mahihirapan na po nating isort yan individually or manually. So kailangan na natin ng high-tech machine that can sort the eggs from 25,000 to 45,000 per eggs per hour. The advantage of which is you have less downgrades, you have cleaner eggs because you have egg washer. Some machines have UV treatment for the eggs. And all the packing and the sorting will be done by the machine, so you need less manpower. Eventually, the cost will be lower for this. And the big key accounts, the hotel and restaurant institutional accounts, eventually would require suppliers to maintain their quality of production, like especially the eggs. So some are already investing in equipment to monitor the egg quality, the specific gravity, shell thickness, yolk index, etc., so that the key customers are requiring that the eggs that you deliver will be consistent in qualities, so that you will be able to protect as well the consumers as well, diba? So you need machines to make sure that the eggs are safe and new. Now, what are the opportunities for poultry production? Well, not to the detriment of the hog industry, because of the ASF outbreak, the chicken will replace pork as the most consumed meat eventually. No? This is from the economics. You know? And the population of the chicken will really dominate the population of the livestock industry, livestock population worldwide. From they were saying that 23 billion out of the 30 billion livestock population is poultry. And because of the availability of poultry, the consumption of poultry meat has increased by 70%. This is, of course, pre-COVID era. But it will continue as long as the economy will return to normal. Now, also it's faster to produce broilers than pork, because if you had the old chick, you only need around 30 to 35 days. Meron ka ng manok, ano. And Asia is the largest egg producing region. Of course, we have China and Vietnam, and we are in that area. So talagang nandito ang potential for growth and expansion. Now, if you are looking at the per capita consumption, meaning how many kilos of poultry meat an average Filipino will eat in 1 year, you can see that in 2006, from 7 kilos, it has risen to 13 kilos in 2019 or in 2020, in 2019 and 2020. But of course, there will be a reduction because of the COVID. And it is projected to reach 14 kilos in year 2025. This, you might say that it's big, but in other countries, they're consuming more than 100 kilos of chicken per capita. No? And they were saying that based on the one magazine said that last year they were saying that chicken will eventually overtake pork as the preferred protein. Ako, for one, for health reason, I don't normally eat pork as that much as I do with chicken. No? So chicken is the meat for us to eat as long as it's available in the market. And I know for a fact that history na to na yung ating mga tao natakot silang kumain ng baboy gawa ng ASF in 2019. So there is a shift shift from pork to chicken and beef. And big as in dahil mahal ang beef, talagang chicken nakakainin. And it is a sad news that for the hog industry that yung meron na rin po na tayong ASF yata sa Visayas. Nagkaroon na sila ng pastid doon. No? So I hope that although I know that in Luzon, many hog farms are already stocking up their farms with hogs for a limited volume kasi maganda naman ang presyo and they're willing to take the risk just as long as they can produce the pork meat that Filipinos would love to eat. Now, what are other opportunities? Of course, I mentioned earlier that the tunnel sheds will do a lot as far as efficiency is concerned. But because of the lack of ample supply of day-old pullets in the market, many poultry raisers were forced to raise their layer strains in more than the required or more than the prescribed number of weeks in the manual. Normally, you only raised it at 90 weeks of age, you know? And if you are produced because of efficiency of the management, the type of housing, yung 400 eggs at 90 weeks of age, nakukuha na ngayon daw yung 500 eggs at 100 weeks of age. So you can extend your growing of your layers by producing more eggs, given that nakuha na nila yung supposed to be prescribed time na mag-lay sila. And of course, that is coupled with advancement in nutrition and better husbandry. So those are opportunities. Now, I'd like to focus on the layer industry because medyo stable to. So we can see that yung importation ng PS natin, nakikita nyo, nag-auto-correct sila. No? If the prices are good, they try to increase their PS importation. If the prices goes down, nagre-reduce sila, etc., etc. So the tendency, nakikita rin natin that on the farm level, pag mataas ang presyo ng layers, hindi sila nagbebenta ng culls, pero pag mababa ang presyo ng eggs, nagbebenta sila ng culls. No? So likewise, the per capita consumption of egg is still very low. It's around 110 to 120 eggs per capita. If you imagine myself, I ate 3 eggs a day. So if the time is 365, I eat 1,000 eggs a day. So, ibig sabihin yan, kung kumakain ako na madami, may mga taong hindi pa na kumakain talaga ng itlog. So, it's an issue of producing eggs and another issue of making the eggs available to the consumer. And we always consider the eggs to be one of the cheapest source of protein. No? I mentioned earlier that there is limited chances for imports so that you can produce eggs for domestic consumption. Okay. But the key here is to make sure that the eggs that we produce will get to the market. So you have to have better access. And how do you do better access? I mentioned earlier to you that marami nag-online selling, etc., etc. They establish egg depot, put up rolling stores, and then the creation of the restaurant and fast foods, yung mga silog-silog yan, yun ang malakas daw na kumakain ng itlog. And however, because of the lack of school, medyo humina yan. Pero eventually, babalik din yan. These are opportunities so that when there is an increased demand of eggs in the market, the poultry raisers has the right to increase their production. Now, the most important opportunity for us is to have a available COVID vaccine. No? I, for one, would say that ako magpapabakuna ako. And if there is a herd immunity, as they would say, there's a potential to return to normal and return to normal economy. And of course, magkakaroon na ng demand for food kasi ang priority ng tao is food. And among food is yung chicken at saka yung ating eggs. You know? Now, I'm not very optimistic about this, pero sinabi ko nga sa inyo na there is an improved chances for exports and there will be less imports if we become competitive in the future. No? But competitive does not necessarily mean that we can really achieve that in a short period of time. Because these are the factors that are barriers to export. No? We have very high production costs. Our cost to produce now per kilo of live broiler, given the cost of one is around 95 pesos per kilo. If the prices of DOC is around 20, the cost to produce is around 70. And other neighboring countries, the advanced countries, are producing less than that. That is why they are able to export the chicken to other countries. But the main key here is we have very high cost of inputs, corn, soya, etc., and low production efficiency. The stakeholders are willing to do this, but given the high cost of inputs, medyo hindi pa tayo makakalaban. And more importantly, the clients outside the country are requiring that we don't have this issue on antibiotic residues as well as animal welfare. And of course, the presence of endemic diseases is a deterrent for importing countries because I remember in 2018 or 2019, Singapore had a problem with Malaysia, so they decided to ask the Philippines for importation of eggs, and they were saying, give us a titer of this and this so that we will be sure that the eggs that we are going to give us, or the chicken that you're going to give us, does not have any titers of this disease. So we have to improve on that, and it is the role of the veterinarians like us, like me, to do that now. So I'm just recapping these things. I would say that there will be an increased demand for poultry products as a source of protein, but we have to make sure that they are competitive in price and quality. And in the near future, demand for poultry will be influenced by how we raise chicken. So that ito na nga yung meron na market for organic chicken, meron na market for free-range chicken. More importantly, yung issue ng antibiotic resistance. So dapat meron lang residue ng antibiotic, and the issue of animal welfare. And the government has established the policies that will, for implementation, how we can eventually reach that target as far as the product is concerned. Now, feeds. Feeds is 70% of your cost. So if the feeds are not available, if the feeds are expensive, your cost to produce will be expensive. And based on the latest issue of the feed strategy, they were saying that you have to prepare for market volatility as far as raw materials is concerned. I think soya is expected to reach 30 pesos per kilo. Corn is around 15 to 16. And what is important, what is critical is meron na nga tayong nabibili pero baka yung quality hindi pa maganda. Secondly, key here is there enough land available for poultry or livestock production because of the zoning issues, limited available space for egg product, for poultry production as well as livestock production. Eventually, kukunti na lang. So if kaya nga lumalabas na po ngayon yung tunnel ventilated houses na given on a per square basis, mas marami kang maalagaan because of that. Ano? But more importantly, aside from that, is the government support to poultry production. The government has to help the industry by subsidies. Ito yung medyo critical issue dito. No? Although I'm sure the government is doing their thing, I, for one, would like to see that the government would support more the corn farmers, because if the corn farmers produce the corn, we don't the production cost will be lesser for us, because corn is around 50 to 60% of your feed cost. You know, not only will they help the farmers by giving the support as far as growing is concerned, but also the marketing aspect. They have to make sure that the product that the farmers are producing will be bought at a reasonable price and will reach the customer at a reasonable price. You know? There has to have more dialogues with poultry producer as far as import is concerned. I hope that you will agree with me. And as far as LGU requirements, it has to be uniform. Hindi pwedeng yung requirement ng isang bayan na iba doon sa requirement ng isang bayan. And I think the government should set up the whatever requirements it has to impose on the poultry producers as well as the livestock producers. Actually, I don't know if there will be more lands available for livestock production, but more on issues how we become efficient given on a per square basis. So all in all, I think it's supposed to be an issue on efficiency. We have to produce more for less. I mentioned earlier that there should be a balance of production over imports. And in the long term possibility, we should be less reliant on imports, whether it be rice, whether it be corn, whether it be pork or in chicken. But that will take a concerted efforts of the producer as well as the government. So I'd like to reiterate, balance is our key to survival and sustainability. Hindi pwedeng hindi mabalance yan, kasi otherwise merong magsasuffer na sector kung di balance ang industry. And with that, I'd like to end by saying that for us to sustain and to survive, we have to be resilient. And according to Jamais Castillo, resilience is all about being able to overcome the unexpected. And sustainability is about survival. And according to Frank Herbert, survival is the ability to swim in strange water. Right now, we are in strange water because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and you can now post questions as when it is available. Thank you for your time.
Now, let's go to the question and answer portion of our webinar. So, Doc, for our first question, so somebody is asking, what is your advice to the young people who want to venture in the poultry industry business?
It's when you want to venture in the poultry business, assuming you have the capital, it's not a remote control business. Hindi pwedeng mag-aalaga ka ng manok doon sa province tapos nasa Manila ka. It has to be hands-on. Because buhay ang alaga mo. When we take care of living things, hindi pwedeng malayo ang nag-aalaga. Ganun lang yun. Secondly, you have to make sure that whatever produce you have, there is a market for that, because there will be no ideal, efficient return of investment kung pangit ang market mo. So, talaga yung study. They were saying earlier, a few years back, that the poultry industry, the broiler industry is a sunset industry, but I tend to disagree, because as long as people are consuming chicken, it is a good industry.
True. Yes, that's very true. So thank you so much for that, Doc. Now, moving on to our second question. So they are asking, are there new deadly poultry disease that could threaten the industry? And if there are, what are these?
Yung namin so kanina, yung kasing nature ng ating poultry raising, merong areas na madaming kwan. So the concentration of the poultry population is very high. So nagkakaroon siya ng tinatawag nating endemic diseases, ano. So these are nothing new, the Newcastle disease, IB, IBD, etc., etc. But I think the very critical disease, important disease, is the avian flu or the bird flu, you know. And it is a deadly disease because it is supposed to be zoonotic, but more so it has I think sinasabi nga nila yung impact on the health of the people of the bird flu disease is less than the impact on the market of the birds, because pagka nagka-bird flu tayo, ayaw na kumain ng tao, yung although hindi naman talaga proven na ganun talaga nakakahaway yung bird flu sa tao, na nakakamatay masyado, diba? So ganun yun. So the government is doing its surveillance as far as the bird flu is concerned, and the key here for poultry raisers is biosecurity. They have to make sure that the entry of pathogens is limited so that the chances of their birds getting sick will be slow or small.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. Yes, I think I think a few months back when there was a scare of bird flu, people were also very frightened to consume chicken.
I know.
So now let's proceed to our third question. So another question, is there any ongoing programs between your organization, the Department of Agriculture, and the Land Bank to support incoming young entrepreneurs that are going to poultry industry or poultry business?
Yung kasing organization ng the Philippine College of Poultry Practitioner is a collegial body, so we don't do policy. We train, we inform people. So for those young entrepreneurs who want to venture into poultry raising, I think the banks are available for loans because it is a important industry. So I think wala naman limitations sa paglo-loan. Ang issue lang dyan is if you have the land, and if you can get the approval of the local government, if you can get the necessary permits, environmental clearances, then madali lang magtayo ng poultry. But putting up a poultry facility is one thing, maintaining it and become profitable is another thing.
Yes.
So sinasabi ko kasi hindi ganoon kadali mag-alaga ng poultry.
Yes, I think it's easy. It's a bit easy to start to go into the industry, but then maintaining it and then profiting from it is really it's a long process and also a tedious journey. But kakayanin siguro yan ng mga...
I would like to add that for small entrepreneurs, you can do all ang key ngayon, ang medyo in ngayon yung free range chicken, ano. So you can you can buy those stock. Kaya lang medyo small scale kasi ang problema sa free range chicken at saka doon sa mga one is there is a limited facility to dress. No, based on my colleague who is an expert on that, Dr. Erwin Cruz, ang production cost ng per kilo of a range chicken, kung maganda yung strain mo, is around 7 months, 150 pesos over 70 days. Pero yung problema, it has to be sold locally kasi walang magde-dress ng manok na yan kasi kokonti. Pero maganda rin ang kita.
Yes, and actually I think parang trend or yes, people free range chicken is already getting more and more popular.
It's in. Yeah.
Yes. So now let's proceed to our next question, Doc. So there's a talk that powder egg will be imported soon. So is this true or parang myth lang ba ito, Doc?
Sinabi ko nga kanina yung kinakain yung, hindi ako magme-mention ng restaurant, mag-breakfast kayo sa isang fast food chain, meron ng halong powdered chicken yan. Powdered egg, ano? Pero yung powdered egg kasi, if you have a 60-gram egg, 70% of that is water. So pag ginawa mo siyang powder, tatanggalin mo yung 70%, and that will increase your cost by 70%. So yung mga nag-i-export nga is coming from a good example is that if you import powdered egg from, let's say, from Japan and other countries, usually ang itlog nila is kulay brown, ano? And pag yung manok kasi pagka nagkaroon ng konting problema, nagkasakit, ang tendency ng chicken, ng egg niya will become pale or puputla. Unlike yung white chicken natin na hindi mo mapapansin. So and majority of the eggs in Japan are sold in the groceries, you know. So wala namang masyadong wet market doon. So yung mga downgrades na hindi na mabebenta yun sa mga groceries and supermarkets. So yun ang ginagawa. Long duration, yun ang potential na pwedeng gawing powdered egg. Pero kung yung good egg mo, gagawin mong powdered egg, ay mataas yun. So I think there's a limit to that because marami naman tayong itlog. So I don't think the importation of chicken will be an issue. One thing about us we having white eggers is karamihan ng neighbors natin sa Asia are growing brown eggs, Pero it's very hard to import chicken eggs from other countries kasi madali siya masira, especially the liquid eggs. So okay lang tayo. That's why the table egg industry is medyo stable kasi hindi masyadong naapektuhan ng imports.
Yes, so we're actually okay tayo sa ating egg na volume, so no need na to import. Okay. That's good to hear actually, na stable yung ating egg production. So now let's move to our next question. At what time this year would the production of breeder, DOC or breeder farms be back to normal para bumaba naman ang DOC price?
Normally, when you have a parent stock, it will start laying at around 25 weeks. Pero majority yan is after 40 weeks. So usually, kung nag-import ka ng PS now, after 6 months, meron ka ng sisiw. So it takes a longer time, 6 months. So the best thing for us to do is if we can import hatching egg for the races para merong maalaga. Kasi ang bilis tumaas ng presyo kasi lahat gusto mag-alaga ng manok kasi mataas ang presyo. Pero ang mahirap dyan, nag-import ka ng mahal, tapos pagdating na mag-harvest ka, bumagsak naman ang presyo, kawawa naman yung racer. Diba? And that happens in the past. That happened in the past.
Yes, that's actually the sad story or the sad reality.
Yeah.
So now this is our last question po, Doc. So what are examples of LGU policies that are detrimental to the poultry industry?
Baka makakano ko dito. Well, actually, wala naman. Sometimes it's not the policy, kundi yung interpretation ng policy. Diba? For example, yung mga poultry farms, sabi nila gusto raw meron kaming nabalitaan na yung poultry farms gustong pabakuran noong LGU ng 7 feet para daw hindi umamoy yung poultry. Well, in fact, it's a conventional building. Alam naman natin na pag ganun kataas, pangit ang ventilation given the space. So actually, the policies are okay. Yung interpretation ng policy, ang nag-i-implement, medyo nagkakaroon ng problema. Lalo na kung medyo galit sa yung mayor, kawawa ka talaga. Off the record.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. So yes, I think like what Doc have said, Dr. Renato have said, it's not the policy itself, but the interpretation and the execution din siguro. Siguro we need to have a clear interpretation of those policies. But in general, those policies are really helpful, or are yung what's behind or the reason behind those policies are really helpful. So now, Doc, thank you so much.
Sige. Alam kung meron tayong time. Sige.
Okay lang po. But yes, before we close this webinar, of course, Doc, as for our last request from you po, can you give a message to our viewers, especially that we have a lot of viewers from the poultry industry, so we have practitioners and producers, and we also have students and from the different academe all around the Philippines. So any message for them?
Message is, I'm a poultry veterinarian and a member of the PCTT, so I have two issues here. Number one is poultry industry is here to stay because people would love to eat chicken. So it is really up to us to excel or to be efficient for it to survive and to sustain its growth. So for those who want to learn more about the raising of poultry, the Philippine College of, parang advertisement to, the Philippine College of Poultry Practitioner normally holds a poultry school mga September yan. We have been doing that for the last 22 years. And the last time we did that was virtual. So we will have another one in September. If you want to, although meron siyang fee, pero hindi naman siya masyadong mahal, especially pag virtual. If you're interested, just look for at Facebook, at the Philippine College of Poultry Practitioner Facebook. So makikita niyo yung details for upcoming details. It's really a good seminar. It's a 2-day thing. So those who want to learn, and also those universities, pwede naman natin gawin ito sa mga university. The PCPP is active in sharing what its knowledge to the poultry school. In fact, meron kami mga tours sa mga colleges around the Philippines. But we can do it now easily virtual. All you have to do is coordinate with PCPP through the Facebook page and request yung dean or fan, and we will be willing to schedule a seminar for you on whatever topic that will fit your needs. So, thank you.